Osio, Candace Berdalado, welcome to the Cherokee National History Museum and welcome to the Cherokee Artist Showcase. I am here today to speak with Cherokee National Treasure, Lisa Rutherford, about her many art disciplines. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Candace. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Wonderful. So good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Well, I wanted to ask you some questions about some of your mediums today because for those of you who don't know Lisa or her work, Lisa is proficient in several mediums and she undertakes very different mediums in different times and I wanted to go to the beginning and ask her what was your first medium that you picked up that started your artistic journey.
Um, I started out when I was very young doing art, and my grandmother was an oil painter. And I remember her letting me play with her oil paints and her pastels when I was 4 or 5 years old. So that's where my interest started. But about 2005, 2004, I was really bored. I was missing having art in my life. And that's when I worked with Bill Glass and the Gadugi team on the artwork, the public installation at the Passage in Chattanooga. So I was a volunteer on that project. And I learned, I'd done ceramics in college, wheel throwing and that sort of thing. But working with Bill on this project, I learned all different aspects of working with clay. And I realized I really missed it. So when that project ended, I saw an advertisement for a traditional pottery class with Jane Austin, and I enrolled. And Jane took me under her wing, and I worked with her. Well, I still work with Jane. So Jane taught me all about making the hand-built pottery and how to fire it. She went beyond that and she taught me how to enter the art shows and the markets. And she was really a really strong mentor. And of course, we're still close friends to this day.
Yeah, and Jane Austen herself is a Cherokee National Treasure. I wonder if when you first started with Jane, did you ever have an inkling that you too might one day follow and become Cherokee National Treasure?
I was actually one of the people that nominated her for Cherokee National Treasure. But no, at the time, I didn't even think about it. And of course, you can't talk about pottery without mentioning Anna Mitchell, who is a mentor to all of us. And she, of course, taught Jane. And I also took a couple of classes with Anna. So she was a big influence, maybe more indirectly through Jane, but Anna was a huge influence on my pottery style.
Yeah, Anna Six Killer's legacy is so widespread. And I want to talk a little bit about your research at the National Museum of the American Indian. You went there as a part of a fellowship, yes?
Yes, I had become interested in the textiles and the clothing. It all evolved from the pottery. Jane and I went to a pottery conference where we saw a, they had replicated a piece of pottery that had twine textile imprinted on it. And that's where we first saw people using the carved wood paddles. So we went home, and Jane says we beat the heck out of about 50 pounds of clay with, she had a paddle or two. And then we got with Joel Queen and Tamara Bean, two of the people that we met at that conference. But that textile stuck in my mind, and I wanted to replicate that for my pottery. So that grew into making twine bags, the skirts, and I started demonstrating cultural arts. So I started wearing the 18th century style clothing like the Eastern Band was wearing back then, and met some of their artists and Barbara Duncan at their museum. She was a great help sharing research on how to make the clothing and the feather capes. So that got me interested, and I realized they were made on a net base, a hand-tied net. So that kind of appealed to my interest in textiles. So I started making the feather capes. Actually, I studied one and figured out how to make one. It probably wasn't that great. I figured out how to do the net. Tanya Weevil, who's also a national treasure, and my boss, David Fowler, David knew how to do netting. So David and Tanya and I got together and tried to figure out how to make these feather capes. And I made one, and then later on I was able to meet with Deborah Herding from the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, and she kind of straightened me out on some of the areas I was having trouble on, and I guess I've made over 30 feather capes by now. I'm going to show you some of the steps I go through to make a feather cape. How I start with the netting with the hemp cordage, and then I'll show how to fold down and lash the feathers so that they can be sewn to the netting. I'm going to explain how I do that and give you a good idea how they're made. Okay, so I'm making a net base for the feather capes, and they're hand-tied and they're custom made to fit the wearer. And this is a polished hemp yarn. And my shuttle is actually a broken arrow from my time when I worked at Deligua. Every time the guys would break an arrow, I would go get it because it already had that one end notched and ready to hold my thread. I'm not really sure how long I will make it, but if you make them too long, it kind of cuts the wearer in half and makes them, the proportions look awkward. So I usually, unless I have a custom order, I usually just kind of make it up as I go. And this frame is not ideal. This is what I make my twined bags on, but I needed something portable that would hold my base row of hemp. This is just the framework for the top part of like the Beloved Woman cape. Hers is a one shoulder cape, which this one, hers would actually be more, if you laid it out flat, more like almost a full circle. And this one isn't quite that full because it will tie at the neck. Okay, so I had to do an increase here on the end. I'll have to flip it over because I can only work from left to right. So this was probably the hardest part to learn about making capes. And I'm getting faster. I can make one in a day now.
When I speak to artists, is that something that I get an impression of is that art is not created in a vacuum, especially Native American art and early Native American art. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about the feathered capes. You've made some that are on display here at the museum. What was your thought process in going into creating some of the feather capes that are here?
Well, the capes here, that's one of the things I kind of struggled with, how to balance that, because I think they are very utilitarian, but for a war chief and a peace chief, they may have been ceremonial as well. So I just made them, I interpreted them based on my research and my research that I did at the Smithsonian Institution back in 2014, I believe. I was able to go spend 2 weeks there through their art leadership program as part of the community arts program. and study the twine textiles and the feather cape remnants. There are precious few of them, but from what I can tell, they were mostly used for warmth, but I did see some in the collections that were dyed, and all of them were red, black, and white. Every example that I saw, other than just a simple, maybe the turkey feather blankets, but those I'm pretty sure that, I don't know if they were skirts or capes or blankets or what, because there were just little tiny remnants of them left. But there were the larger pieces, and they were a red background, and they had black and white feathers woven into them. And those, I think, may have been ceremonial, and that brought to mind the shell carvings that I've studied. And a lot of the larger shells, you will see figures like the Birdman with his arms outstretched, and you could see the feathers hanging down. So that made me wonder, was he wearing actual feathers, or is he wearing a feather cape with a woven feather design in it? So in that case, I think some of them may have been ceremonial. So when I created this exhibit, I just tried to find a balance there, because I don't know about the ceremonial aspect of it. I don't think any of us today really know what was involved. So that's something, I don't want to do anything wrong or inappropriate as far as ceremonial objects. And the same with my pottery. There are certain designs I can't use. The pot will break or something bad will happen, and I just, if it happens, if I have a lot of trouble with a particular design, I just don't use it. I don't think we really know a lot about the symbolism and the intentions behind the ceremonies, so I try to stay away from that.
And I think that that's very respectful, and I think that that's something that Nagofti Scott, and another Cherokee National Treasure, and one of your former teachers. I think that that's something that he would probably agree with. Though I don't want to
Yes.
put words in his mouth.
Yes, he was a big influence too. Nagofti was very knowledgeable about the symbolism, and I really learned a lot. Well, as you know, since you were also his student, but yeah, he had a lot of knowledge. Bill Glass also has a lot of knowledge of the symbolism. And of course, I've spent a lot of time in Bill's studio, not only working on the Passage project, but I have been in his sculpture mentorship class. So gosh, 2 years, three, I studied with him every Sunday. So we would go up, and a group of us would study sculpture with him. And it was through the Cherokee National Treasure mentoring program, which allowed us to have a long-term mentorship with an artist and really learn all the ins and outs, all aspects of the art. Right now I've soaked the quills of the feather to soften them, and I bend it around. Usually I use a nail, but this is what I had. And I'm going to form a loop here, and this is called lashing. And I'm going to wrap this around several times. Whoops. And the trick is to not get it too tight or too loose, because I'm going to take the end of this thread and go back through that little loop that I left. And when I pull it snug, I'm going to grasp the tail here. I've got a little bit of tension on there, and I'm going to pull it. And it pulls that loop under the wrapped thread, and that secures it. And this just gives it a nice little round eye for my needle to sew through, because I'm going to sew onto every knot on that net. And there's going to be 750, 800 feathers on a cape, depending on the size of it.
Do you find that you are drawn to a medium based on the challenges it presents to you as an artist, or do you choose your medium based on the message that you wish to convey?
A little of both. Sometimes I like feather capes. I've made several recently. I'm going to be done with those for a while, and I don't want to see feathers for a while. I want to get back into pottery, or I want to do some beadwork. I'm really missing the beadwork, and of course Martha Berry was my beadwork mentor, so I miss that. And I make the traditional clothing, the historic clothing. Mostly I got into that because of my living history work. So if I need a new outfit, if I have a living history job, maybe my clothes are getting shabby and I decide I need to make some new things, and I'll get onto that for a while. But then I'll get tired of that and I want to go back. I miss the feel of the clay in my hands. So I think when I finish this feather cape, I'm going to work in clay for a while. And I created the feather capes for the exhibit here in this museum. I started in the summer of 2018, and I finished in early 2019 on the project. Actually, it was at the outreach clinic, and I started this one. I had one of them done, so they kind of overlapped, and I was very rushed. I got hired full-time in the middle of that, so I had less time per week to work on it. So after that ended, I really didn't want to see any feathers for quite a while. But now I'm ready to work in clay. And shells. I'm missing the shells.
Do you find that the different mediums just bring different things to you at different times in your life, at different seasons? Because I've noticed in your years of work that there will be a demand for your feather case, but then all of a sudden there's a demand for your pottery. And I wondered, how do you find that balance? And there is there's an inherent intertwining, I think, that goes into each of these mediums for you. And I wondered, do you feel like each of these mediums have something different or something to teach you every time you come back to one of them?
I think so. The clay, just having your hands in that damp clay and being able to form it and mold it into things. It's literally a very grounding experience. You feel very connected to it. I feel like when I work in clay, I'm very much a part of it. We were joking around when we worked on the artwork for the passage that our DNA is in this clay. Maybe you lick your finger and rub off a spot on the pot or something, so your fingerprints are on it. You're very much a part of it. The feather capes, to me, that's more, there's not as much creativity involved in that. It's not as much expression, other than maybe the colors, and if you create a whole outfit. For example, the outfit in the Gilcrease exhibit, weaving, what was it? Weaving history into art, the enduring legacy of Shan Gosshorn. And of course, Shan was a dear friend of both of us. One of my exhibits there is very historic, the Delilah the woodpecker. And then I made the blue outfit, and I've still never come up with a better name than blue because it's blue fabric, but that one was meant to be inspired by the ancestral clothing, but I also wanted to, one of the things I did, I made it entirely of materials that I had in my stash. So the only thing I had to buy for that outfit, I think, was I ran out of some of the trim and I had to buy more of it, but everything in there, I just dug through my stash and I just laid it out, and I like this color against this one and this texture against the wool. And I just put that together as a very modern outfit. But I wanted it to be something that, say I get invited to a museum opening or an exhibit or something, and I want to wear cultural or traditional clothing, then that outfit would be perfectly suitable for that. But I made it a little, we put the curly paper hair on her, the wig, and we got a plus size model that she's very sassy. So that outfit was just more of a fun play on ancestral style. That one, I liked it so much I deliberately made it too small for me because I knew I would be tempted to keep it.
Very wise.
But the net, you could see, if I hold it up, you could kind of see the shape of it. And that's because of where the points are, I have put increases here to make it wider. So maybe I start out with 24 loops on the top, and by the time I get to the bottom, I've probably got 75, 80, 90, depending on how long you make it. And then I increase over the shoulders and on each front edge. Okay, so we're going to take this brown hemp net. Normally, I would have a brown feathers, maybe turkey feathers. I like for mine to be curved toward the center back. Other people can do them different ways, but like I'm going to start on this corner, and I'm going to take my thread, and I usually use the artificial sinew that's split, and I'm going to tie it on here, and I'm going to sew that first feather to that knot. And I am going to continue. I usually put longer feathers at the bottom, so I'm going to continue placing these feathers. And just work my way up. So every knot has a feather. So wearing a feather cape, they're quite warm. So they're surprising for their weight. So you can see why our ancestors wore them. You're basically wearing a down coat.
When someone sees a piece of your work, whether that's beadwork or pottery, and I know sometimes we make pieces to say a very specific message, but I wondered, what do you hope is the heart or the essence that you hope someone will take away from one of your pieces? Like, well, let's talk about like one of the pieces here in this museum, in the Cherokee National History Museum.
I want people to look at these objects and stop referring to us in the past. We are still here. And I watched a video a few days ago, and it was a friend of mine on I think it was a Facebook Live or something, and people were commenting, and someone told her, it's nice to know how they used to make pottery. And I thought, okay, Jane is still doing this. I am still doing this. Lots of artists are still making this. This is not in the past. But I want them to see that we do have a connection to our past and our ancestors, and that we are, in a way, I feel like, I hope my work honors them and educates people about Cherokees in the past and today. But I think my overall message is we're still here, and we're still a very vibrant, active community.
I think that's a very powerful message, and I hope that that's one that people come away with too. For my last question, are there any special pieces that stick out to you, whether it was the experience of making it or if it was the people who were influencing you?
Well, the exhibit here in this museum is very special to me. This is special to me because it's here on display. A lot of people are going to see it and they're going to learn about Cherokee people. And they're going to look at the female figure and see that she's wearing a twined skirt and twined shoes. She's not wearing a lot of deerskin, or she's not wearing a headdress, or this is how people dressed. So this one is, and being here in Tahlequah, my hometown and everything, this is special to me.
Thank you for sharing and for being here with me today, and for sharing all of your art.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been fun.